If you'd like to learn how to make projectiles for your Obby that fly at characters and hurt them if they get hit, keep watching and I'll show you exactly how to do it. Welcome to Roblox Snippets, and this is our 9th obstacle that I'm showing you how to do today, that I'll be adding to a main game Obby at the end of this if you're interested or been following along. And today's will be projectiles, ones that will move towards the player like big cannonballs, and if they hit the player they'll damage them. There's lots of things you can do with that. Now in the demo I showed, I'd made sort of a cannon sort of thing. We're just going to keep it simple in the example, and then you can take the code away and create a much fancier cannon or gun to fire them out of. So we just need a couple of parts to do this, just to simulate it. And the first one in our workspace, if you come up to Home and then over to Part, we'll add in a cylinder. And we'll also, just while we're here, we'll add in a sphere as well. So just drop down and add in a sphere. And we'll just name these so we're clear on what this is. We'll call our sphere here a pod. And I've used pod. You could call it bullet or projectile or whatever you like, because a pod sort of, I think from Plants vs Zombies, so like a pod shooting out. So you can make it whatever colour, etc. you'd like. But I'm going to make mine green, like Plants vs Zombies. And I'll just pick a lime green, and I'll make it a neon colour so that it's really bright. And we'll come down and we might make the pod, we'll make it fairly big, I think, so that it's big enough to sort of run into a player, because that's how I've designed it in my main game Obby. So I'll just come down to its properties down here, and we'll change its size to be 3 by 3 by 3. And while we're in here, if you move down to Can Collide, we're going to actually turn that off, because we don't want it to run into the player, although you could, by all means. We're going to destroy the pod when it hits the player. So I'll turn off Can Collide, but by all means leave yours on if you wish. And Anchored I'm going to turn on for the time being, because we want it to stay wherever it gets spawned, and then we're going to move it. So that's our pod, or our bullet, that we're going to use. Now we'll create this other part over here, and we'll call this our cannon. Right, you could call it gun if you wanted to. And we'll just make a couple of changes to this, because we don't want to spend too much time building. First thing will be Anchored. We'll put on. We'll turn off Can Collide, and then we'll come up to the size for our cannon, and we'll change this one to be 3 by 3 by 3 as well. And just move it up like this. And now we want it to shoot in a direction, so if we come up to rotate, and we might click on model, and we'll choose 90 degrees here to make sure that we only move it the amount that we want. And let's rotate it so that it's firing sort of out in front of us, like so, which you can make it fire any direction you like. And we'll make it a bit more like a gun sort of colour, say a dark stone grey, and maybe change its properties down here. Alright? Yeah, let's just go metal, that'll do. Alright, so we have these two parts, and I'd say what we'll do is we'll move our pod part for a start over, because we're going to make this sit basically inside of this part here. Alright, so we want to move our pod inside. So if we click on the cannon and then come down to its position currently, click on it and hit Command or Control C to copy it, and then we'll click on the pod and we'll paste that position into its position and hit Enter, and you should find that it will move directly right inside of our cylinder here. Now I'm a little bit off in which way we're facing when we started this, so I'll just I'll leave it where it is at the moment, and we'll see how that works. So we've positioned it in the middle of our cannon, so it's a loaded gun ready to go. Right, so if you've got something looking like that, we're ready to move on and add some code to it. Alright, so the first item that we will add code to is our pod. Now you'll sort of notice, like I said, this angle is a bit off. I'd like it to be a bit square, and I thought I'd leave this in just so I could show you if you wanted to fix these things. If we click on our cannon, you'll notice that under its properties, under position, there's orientation, and it's set to this 68. Now, if I want it to be square, I can change this to be 90, and then that will line up perfectly with my base plate and square on when we drag the other item forward. Now, if I click on the pod, all right, you'll see that its orientation is set to 0. So now we can drag it forward so that it comes out of the cannon smoothly without having to move sideways. All right. So as I said, we're going to add some code to the pod. So you can move it outside of the cylinder at the moment, but click on the pod in the workspace and we'll add a script to this. And we're going to call this our damage player script. So over in our script, let's get rid of hello world, and we'll add a couple of variables and a little bit of code. So create a variable for the pod itself. So pod equals script.parent. And then right below this, we'll add a variable called db, short for debounce, used to control our code. And you'll see how that works down below. Now I've already written this script, so I'm going to create another variable here called damage per hit, which will be equal to 10. And you can play with this figure. You could make this 100, or you could even just kill the player straight away if you really wanted to. Totally up to you. Down below this, so when the pod gets touched, all right, so that's the event that's happening, we're going to connect a function to it and pass in whatever hit the pod. And in this case, we're looking for a character. So we'll create a variable here for a character, and we're going to assume that what hits this hits the pod is going to be a character. But we'll write a conditional statement to check because there may be other things in the game moving around, or it may hit a building or something else, and we just wanted to do damage when it hits a character or player. So for that reason, we'll add the player in as well. So local player. And we'll get the player by saying game.players, and then get player from character and pass in our character. Now with that information, we'll make a conditional statement. So if we have a player and DB, then we'll immediately set DB to be false. And towards the end of the script, we're just going to put in a task.wait, and we're not actually going to set DB back to true. We're going to destroy this pod. So just below this task.wait, we can add pod and then a colon and destroy, and that will destroy it for us. So now in here, this is where we can do the damage to our character, or specifically to its humanoid. So we'll create a variable for the humanoid, and then we will look inside of the character. So find first child, and we're looking for the humanoid. Once we have the humanoid, we can simply put in here humanoid take damage. And remember, we created this variable up the top here, damage per hit. So we can type that in and add it in. Now, if you wanted to kill your player, you could simply put humanoid and set their health and set it to 0. And that would just cause them, as soon as they're hit by the pod, to die. However, we're not going to do that in this case, so I'll take that out. And that's all we need in order to get this to work. So when you've done that, we'll get the cannon working before we sort of test this out. So close that script down, and we will come up to our cannon now and add a script. So click on cannon, add plus and a script, and we'll change the name to be cannon script, and get rid of our hello world over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to spawn the pod, which we're going to keep in server storage down here. So each time that we want to fire a pod, we'll get a copy of it from server storage, and then we will fire it from inside this script. So for that reason, we'll create a variable called SS for server storage, and then we'll get that by saying game get service, and in inverted commas, server storage. So that will get us access to this folder down here. And although we haven't moved the pod in there yet, let's create a variable called pod master. So this is like the master copy that's held in server storage. So equals server storage, and then we will wait for child for the name of what we call this over here. So make sure it's named exactly the same. In this case, it will be simply pod. And we'll take a copy of that to fire out, which, remember, it's got this damage player script attached to every time it is spawned, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, the way we're going to move our pod is to use the tween service. So we'll create another variable here, ts, short for tween service, and type game, get service, and our tween service. So tweens will let us animate the pod and move it from one spot to another smoothly, and we can do that over and over and over again once the tween is created. We will, however, we won't need a debounce in this case because we're going to create this with the inside of a while loop. So just a couple of lines down below here, we'll add a while loop by saying while task.wait, and then just outside that do, and drop down a line. Now, we don't want it to fire continuously like this. We'll say the time between shots in here will be how long we want to wait for all of the code to run. So let's just create another variable here called time between shots, and let's set it to, say, 3. Alright, so the lower the number, the more shots that will be fired. The higher the number, less time. Alright, and we can put this in here, so time between shots, and this will run this every 3 seconds effectively. Alright, so now that we have this loop ready to go here, we need to get a copy of the pod master up here. So we'll create a variable called pod, and it will be pod master with a colon, and we will clone that, so which makes a copy. Once we have that copy, we're going to say pod.parent will equal, and we will just put it into the workspace. You could have a folder if you needed to, but workspace will be fine. And we're going to set the position of our pod once we work out where that's going to be. So let's write this in for a start. So pod.position will equal a vector3.new, and for now we'll just put in 0, 0, 0, because we need to come back to our workspace, and let's start where we want this to start. So imagine you have placed this cannon exactly where you want it to fire. All right, we can use the same method we did before, where we take the cannon and come down to its position down here and copy it, so command or control to copy, and then we're going to paste this in here so that it's in the middle. Now this works, you could just use the cannon to position every time we spawn, but you may want the pod to be back here or be loaded, so we'll do the script this way. So now that the pod is in the cannon loaded, we actually want to take its position, so take a copy of that and come in here, and we're going to paste it inside here. So this is effectively its starting position. So you could add a comment here, starting position, and I'll just get rid of these windows. Now we will set, we'll create a variable below this for the pod speed. This will be how fast the pod moves from its starting position to whatever position you want it to finish in. Now keep in mind that if I just come over here, not very well, there we go. All right, so if, for example, you only moved from here to here and it's taking 2 seconds, then the speed is going to be very slow, all right? Whereas if you move it like 400 studs out, the pod is going to move very fast to try and get to that position within 2 seconds. So hopefully that makes sense, and I'll just undo that and put it back. So you'll have to play with that figure a little bit to get it to work exactly how you like it. But in here, we're just going to make ours 2 seconds, all right? And now we can get on to creating all the information we need for our tween. So tweens need some info. And we do that by saying info equals tween info.new. And it comes up with all these numbers. Now the first one in here, the time, is our pod speed. So that's how long the tween it's going to take to complete the tween. Then add a comma, and we'll add enum.easingStyle. And we'll just pick linear. By all means, experiment with this and try others if you wish. And then add another comma, and you'll see in the helper text easing direction. So enum.easingDirection this time, and add a dot. And we're going to choose this one up the top, in out, and you can try the others if you wish. Continuing, if we add another comma, now it says repeat count. So do we want this to repeat? Well, no we don't, okay, because each time a pod is created, we just want it to tween from where it started to where it finished, and when it's done, if it hasn't hit anybody, we want it to disappear. So we'll put in here 0, so it's looking for a number, right? So not true or false, but a number. If you did want it to repeat endlessly, you could put -1, and that will continue to do the tween over and over. Or you could put in a number here, such as I want it to run 3 times. But for now, 0 is the number we're using. And do we want it to reverse? In this case, we don't. All right, we don't want it to reverse, we just want it to go one way. So that is all of the information that we need for our tween info. Now, if you missed that, to make it a bit easier, after each comma, I'll just hit enter so that you can read exactly what is going on. And that will still run the same. It doesn't damage the code by putting it across lines like this. Doesn't look very good, but it makes it easier for you to read. All right, so once we have this info, right below this, we'll now create a variable called goal and put a set of squiggly brackets there. And this represents where we want our pod to move to. So the tween will take whatever we put in here and apply it to the pod up here. In this case, we're going to change the position, all right? So inside of here, we can say goal.position, and we'll equal a vector3. Sorry, I put it inside of the table here. You can do it 2 ways. You can do it this way, where you just put position inside of the table like this. But I'll just, rather than confuse you. So this has an empty table, and so now we'll say goal.position will equal vector3.new. And now we need to decide where it's going to end up. So coming back to our workspace, let's say our pod has started here, and we're going to move it, let's say 80 or 100 studs out. So if I change this to be, say 20 at a time, and we move our pod, so we go 20, 40, 60, and 80, 100. All right, so it's going to move out 100 studs to complete the tween from the cannon. So now we can come back to our script, and I'll just bring up our Explorer and Properties, and let's have a look at its new position. So we'll take a copy of this new position here, so click in the pod's position and copy it, and then we want to paste it in here. Now you'll notice that these two are exactly the same, except the Z has changed by 100. So if you knew which direction it was moving, you could have just put a 1 in there and made it 100 studs. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Now that we have this finishing position, and you can add a comment in here, so finish position, and I'll get rid of those. We can create the tween because now we have all of the information that we need. So right below this, we'll say local tween will equal tween service, and a colon, and create. Whoops, not clone, create. And you'll see that it asks for what is it that you want to tween. Now it is the pod, so that's the part that we're interested in, and then a comma, tween info, which was the info table we created, and the property table is our goal table. So we've given it everything it needs. The last thing to do is to type in here tween and a colon and say play. Now after the tween has played, we want to destroy the pod, but we can't just put destroy here because the tween takes time to play. So we'll use a method by saying tween.completed. So when it's finished, we're going to connect a function to this. So brackets, and just move outside and hit enter. We can say pod destroy. And that should be everything we need to give this a test. Now what this will do is once the tween has reached this destination, the pod will destroy. Alright, so we can give this a test. Before you do that, come up and make sure under view you have your output window on so you can see if you have any errors. Give it a save and let's click on play. Alright, first error was by me, user error. Okay, and this can happen to you too, is we didn't put the pod into the server storage for it to make use of. Alright, so let's open up our Explorer and properties. Now come over to your pod, if it's in the workspace like mine, and right click on it and choose cut. And then come down to server storage, right click and paste into. And now we should be right to give this another go. So let's click on play. Right, if all has gone well, you should see that your cannon is firing out pods every 3 seconds. All right, let's check by standing in front of it, and you should find our damage script is not only damaging the player, but it is destroying the pod when it hits a player. But if I step out of the way, the pod will continue and destroy itself. All right, so if that's enough for you, and you want to go and put it into your own project, I wish you luck. Otherwise, if you want to stick around, I will show you how I add this to my main game, Obby, in the big game that I'm creating. So Alright, if you've stuck around, then we're going to transfer what we've done here today into my main game, Obby. And if you just want to watch, if you're following along, that's great. If you just want to watch to see how to add it to your own project, that might be useful as well. So what we'll do is, I'll just close this script here. We're going to take both of these items and we're going to save them to a file on our computer. So we'll start with the pod. If we left click on it, right click on it and come down to save to file. That will bring up this window, and you should pick somewhere where you can find it again. I've created this folder called video resources. Now I've already done this once, so I'll just click on this one here. You'll notice that I've put 2 letters in front of this. And that's short for server storage, so I can know where to put this when I add it to the main game. And it should be called an RBXM file down the bottom. And when you've got all that sort of typed in ready to go, you can click on save. And I'll replace mine. And then we want to do the same process for the cannon that we wrote in the workspace. So we'll right click on it, come down to save to file. And this time you'll notice I put WS for workspace, so I know where to put that. It's also RBXM file, and when you've got that ready to go, click on save. And I'll replace the one that I had there. Right, so if you want to open up your own project, or the one you've been following along with me, then I'll pause the video and I'll get that one up and running, and I'll show you how to add it in. Right, so this is the main game Obby that I've been working on, and at the moment it has lots of obstacles in it. It's still pretty boring because it's just in a straight line, but I'm going to be working on that very shortly to get a little bit more interest into it. But for now, rather than go through everything that's here, let's look at how to add this obstacle in. So as I said, the first one was our server storage down here. So if we left click on server storage, then right click on it and come down and insert from file. And that should bring up the same folder that you had before if you haven't stopped working. Otherwise located on your computer. And we're after the pod to go into the server storage, and we want to click on open. Alright, and then we'll come up to the workspace and right click on it and come down to insert from file, and we'll add our cannon in like such. Alright, so let's just zoom in on the cannon part for a moment and decide where we're going to put this. So if I take this cannon and I'm going to put this into the game sort of in a position, but it may change in my main game Obby. Just for the purposes of the video, we will just place it up here. Now, I have here, if you haven't seen the video before, a hidden path that comes out here. So what I'll do is I'll make that visible just for the time being. Select all of those and we'll simply make it visible so that I can place my cannon down the end here. And we'll take the cannon part and I'm going to move it down behind these boxes so that it is sort of lined up down the middle there, I guess. We might move it up a little bit. And of course you can place yours wherever you like. Alright, so that looks like it's pretty close. Maybe over this way a bit. Yeah, we'll just move over that way a little bit. Now, you might remember that in the example video, we needed to position our pod. So rather than, what we'll do is we can take a copy of this pod here. So if you copy this, so right click and then copy, and come up to the workspace and paste it into the workspace. We're going to just maneuver it up to where the cannon part is up here. So if I click on the cannon and get its position where I've placed it now, so copy this, and then I'm going to paste it into the pod. So we will simply paste, and if I come up to the cannon now, the pod is placed right inside of the cannon. Now we'll take that position, if we copy that, and we want to come down to the pod inside of server storage and open up, actually we don't need to do anything inside of there, that all works. We want to go into the cannon, my apologies, in the workspace. And remember we have this starting position here that we made a comment. So we want to put the starting position in here. And then down below this, now we want to change this position to see where it will end up. So if we grab the pod that is in the workspace at the moment and we move it along the line that we want it to fire. Now you may not, like my players get up to here, but I don't want them to get hit. So what I'll do is I will make it come to this position here and then it will get destroyed. Alright, so we'll grab that position from down here and copy that and add it into our cannon script in the finish position down here. So we will copy that in, and I just noticed I spelt position wrong. Alright, and that should be everything that we need to do in order to get this to work. Now, we don't need this pod that is in the workspace anymore, so you can right click and simply delete it if you have it down inside of server storage. So with that, if we come up to File and Save, and let's play. Right, off in the distance up here, you can see that the cannon is firing along my Obby, but I will pause the video and then I'll get up to there so you can have a better look. Okay, so I'm up to where I can see these boxes out here, and this hidden path, if you haven't seen this before, you have to get up to this spot, to this box, without dying in order for the path to show up. So players could get tricked if they get up to here thinking they can jump on top of these balls to try and get out there, and that's not a bad thing to have in the game. But if I touch this box, you'll see no path for you down the bottom here, and I can't actually get out to those boxes. However, my cannon is working correctly, and I hope it is for you. And in future videos, I'll show you how I make better use of this in the Obby that I'm creating. So I look forward to seeing you in future videos. If you found this video useful, subscribe now. For more information about my online courses, go to mrbrendanross.com.